Another day, another story. Sojourner Truth, born c. 1797, Ulster County, New York, U.S., died November 26, 1883, Battle Creek, Michigan. African-American evangelist and reformer who applied her religious fervor to the abolitionist and women's rights movements. Sojourner Truth was an African-American abolitionist and women's rights activist who lived in the 19th century. She was born into slavery around 1797 in Ulster County, New York, with the name Isabella Baumfree. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. She escaped from slavery in 1826 and later became a prominent advocate for the abolition of slavery and women's rights. In 1843, Isabella Baumfree changed her name to Sojourner Truth, believing that she was called by a higher power to preach the truth. She became known for her powerful speeches on equality and justice, captivating audiences with her eloquence and passion. One of her most famous speeches is "Ain't I a Woman?" delivered at a women's rights convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851. Sojourner Truth also played a crucial role in the abolitionist movement, working alongside prominent figures such as Frederick and William Lloyd Garrison. During the Civil War, she supported the Union Army and worked to help freed slaves find employment and housing. Her autobiography, The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, published in 1850, documented her life and experiences as a slave, providing insight into the harsh realities of slavery and her journey to freedom. Sojourner Truth's legacy endures as a symbol of courage, resilience, and advocacy for equality. A memorial bust of Truth was unveiled in 2009 in Emancipation Hall in the U.S. Capitol Visitor Center. She is the first African-American woman to have a statue in the Capitol building. In 2014, Truth was included in Smithsonian Magazine's list of the 100 most significant Americans of all time. Sojourner Truth's life is a remarkable story of resilience, faith, and activism. Born into slavery in the late 18th century, she faced the harsh conditions of servitude and the challenges of being separated from her family. In 1826, she seized an opportunity to escape slavery with her infant daughter, fleeing to freedom. Late in 1826, Truth escaped to freedom with her infant daughter, Sophia. She had to leave her other children behind because they were not legally freed in the Emancipation Order until they had served as bound servants into their 20s. She later said, "I did not run off, for I thought that wicked, but I walked off, believing that to be all right." After gaining her freedom, she sought legal action to recover her son, who had been illegally sold while she was still a slave. The court case marked one of the first instances of a black woman successfully suing a white man in the United States to reclaim her child. After her escape, Isabella Baumfree underwent a spiritual transformation, embracing Christianity and changing her name to Sojourner Truth. She felt a calling to preach and share her experiences. Throughout the 1840s and 1850s, Truth traveled and spoke at various abolitionist and women's rights gatherings, advocating for the end of slavery and equal rights for women. Her famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?", delivered at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851, challenged prevailing stereotypes about women's abilities and highlighted the intersectionality of race and gender in the struggle for equality. During the Civil War, Sojourner Truth worked tirelessly to support the Union Army. She met with President Abraham Lincoln to discuss issues concerning black troops and former slaves. After the war, she continued her advocacy for freed slaves, working to secure land and opportunities for their economic independence. Sojourner Truth's dedication to social justice extended beyond her public speeches. She actively participated in the suffrage movement, advocating for women's right to vote. In 1867, she attempted to vote in a local election, challenging the discriminatory practices of the time. Sojourner Truth's life story is a testament to her courage and determination in the face of adversity. Her contributions to the abolitionist and women's rights movements left a lasting impact, and her legacy continues to inspire generations of activists fighting for equality and justice. Isabella was the daughter of slaves and spent her childhood as an abused chattel of several masters. Her first language was Dutch. Between 1810 and 1827, she bore at least 5 children to a fellow slave named Thomas. Just before New York State abolished slavery in 1827, she found refuge with Isaac Van Wagoner, who set her free. With the help of Quaker friends, she waged a court battle in which she recovered her small son, who had been sold illegally into slavery in the South. About 1829, she went to New York City with her 2 youngest children, supporting herself through domestic employment. Since childhood, Isabella had had visions and heard voices, which she attributed to God. In New York City, she became associated with Elijah Pearson, a zealous missionary. Working and preaching in the streets, she joined his retrenchment society and eventually his household. In 1843, she left New York City and took the name Sojourner Truth, which she used from then on. Obeying a supernatural call to travel up and down the land, she sang, preached, and debated at camp meetings, in churches, and on village streets, exhorting her listeners to accept the biblical message of God's goodness and the brotherhood of man. In the same year, she was introduced to abolitionism at a utopian community in Northampton, Massachusetts, and thereafter spoke in behalf of the movement throughout the state. In 1850, she traveled throughout the Midwest, where her reputation for personal magnetism preceded her and drew heavy crowds. She supported herself by selling copies of her book, The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, which she had dictated to Olive Gilbert. Encountering the women's rights movement in the early 1850s, and encouraged by other women leaders, notably Lucretia Mott, she continued to appear before suffrage gatherings for the rest of her life. As Sojourner Truth continued her advocacy work, she faced both admiration and skepticism. Some questioned the authenticity of her story and doubted her ability to deliver such powerful speeches, given her lack of formal education. In 1863, she took action to address these doubts by initiating a lawsuit against a man named Charles G. Sunderland, who had publicly accused her of being a liar. The legal battle, known as Truth v. Sunderland, was a landmark case. Sojourner Truth successfully sued Sunderland for slander, securing a judgment in her favor. This legal victory not only reaffirmed the truth of her narrative, but also highlighted her determination to fight for her reputation and the broader cause of justice. In her later years, Sojourner Truth continued to speak out against injustice and inequality. She was a supporter of the Freedmen's Bureau, an organization created to assist newly emancipated slaves in the post-Civil War era. Truth advocated for the rights of freed slaves, emphasizing the importance of education and economic opportunities for their advancement. Sojourner Truth's commitment to equality was further demonstrated in her involvement in the suffrage movement. She attended women's suffrage conventions and worked alongside prominent suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Despite some tensions within the movement regarding race and strategy, Truth remained dedicated to the cause of securing voting rights for all women. In the 1850s, Sojourner Truth settled in Battle Creek, Michigan. At the beginning of the American Civil War, she gathered supplies for black volunteer regiments, and in 1864 went to Washington, D.C., where she helped integrate streetcars and was received at the White House by President Abraham Lincoln. The same year, she accepted an appointment with the National Freedmen's Relief Association counseling former slaves, particularly in matters of resettlement. As late as the 1870s, she encouraged the migration of freedmen to Kansas and Missouri. In 1875, she retired to her home in Battle Creek, where she remained until her death. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.